So we're going to take a look at a brief discussion during a Q&A between Frank Turek, who is a very well-known Christian apologist, and a professing atheist on the subject of morality and whether it is rooted in God or in humanity apart from the existence of God. As we go through this brief video, you're going to see the points that Frank Turek will make as to why there must be a God for morality to exist, that in the end allows for this gentleman to reflect on the assumptions that he had initially came in with. So let's delve into it.
How you doing?
Hi, I'm Kyle.
Hey, Kyle.
I'm an atheist.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Of course. I love hearing these kind of debates and stuff. You asked why would you be an atheist if you possibly might know if God exists? My answer to that question is simple. It's just the fact that there's so many terrible things in the Bible. Like at one point, Jesus says to one of his disciples, "It's great that they're torturing their slaves here, but only lightly. Even though they did nothing wrong, it's great that they're doing it." He doesn't give any reason to why he says that he doesn't do anything. I don't understand why you would want to follow such a God.
Just to note really quickly that although Frank goes straight into addressing the important issue of the question, which is the atheist's perspective on morality apart from God, there really isn't any passages where Jesus is literally promoting the torturing of slaves to his disciples. I mean, there are many parables and stories that include the discussion of slaves, such as the unforgiving slave in Matthew chapter 18, the faithful and wicked slave in Matthew chapter 24, or even the slave not being greater than their master in Matthew chapter 10. But none of these parables or stories or any other ones promote the actual torturing of slaves. So that, I believe, is an incorrect statement made by this gentleman.
My question to you is why you would follow such a God.
Okay, let's not even look at the context of that passage. Let's just assume what you said is 100% true. Okay? As an atheist, why is that wrong?
Why is that wrong?
Yeah.
Morally, I would think that each and every human being here is the same. We all have the same rights. We all have the same wants and needs. I think we all should do the same. I think that we should, especially the God that we should follow, should have higher expectations of knowing such a God.
Okay, but you seem to be assuming that certain things are really right and people have certain rights, even if there is no God. How do you justify that? What's your standard of rightness?
My standard of rightness would be a fair society.
What do you mean by fair?
Fair? Everything is equal. I have nothing wrong. I find nothing wrong with a communistic state. That's just my opinion. I don't think it's anything to be afraid of. Everybody seems to be afraid of it.
Okay.
In the United States at least. But that's just my thought of fairness, is the idea that all humans should be the same.
Okay, so it's your thought of fairness. What if Hitler has a different idea of fairness? Is he wrong?
He's not wrong.
Hitler's not wrong.
He is not, well, in a kind of idea that we all have our own opinions. I feel like we should take the utilitarian view and go with what is best for the most amount of us.
Okay, but what do you mean by best?
What would mean the greatest positives for the most amount of people?
Okay, but you're assuming that you're assuming there's a best out there. You're assuming a moral law. Where does that moral law come from if there's no God?
Moral law. I personally just think that human beings should be able to make up their own laws. I mean, each people in time have found their own moral laws, and I think that they become better and better over time.
Better, but you wouldn't even know what better was unless you knew what best was. So I'm asking you, what is your standard of best to say that certain people are closer to the best or better than others? What's the standard? Is it just your opinion, or is there something beyond your opinion which says this is good?
So I like the question that Frank proposed. What is your standard of rightness? This is a very important question to ask really anyone, because in order for us to determine what is ultimately right from wrong, there has to be a specific standard that we can all draw our conclusions from. Now, for this gentleman, the standard that he feels should be used isn't God, but an ethical theory called utilitarianism, which is a version of consequentialism, which is really all just a way of determining right from wrong by focusing on the outcomes. It suggests that the best ethical choices that we should make are the ones that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number. The problem with this view, as you will see in Frank's continuing response, is that if humanity is the ultimate decider for setting the standards for morality, morality will always be completely subjective to each individual or group within humanity. Whenever and whatever we decide are the best ethical choices for ourselves, for our communities, and for those outside of our communities, and whatever we think will produce the greatest good for ourselves, our communities, and even for those outside of our communities, those things will ultimately become the standard for moral law. Such a subjective view allows for dictators like Hitler and Stalin and Pol Pot and many others to carry out some of the worst acts of violence in human history. They created their own moral laws based on what they thought would produce the greatest good for themselves and for their own civilization.
Well, I mean, we've all heard about utopias and a perfect society and things like that. That would be great in a way, but also we've all seen like the books like Huxley's, I believe, I forget what it's called, but he makes a book on this
Great
perfect
world.
society. Yes.
Okay, yeah.
It's that perfect society that everybody's perfect, there's no murder, there's no any of that.
Okay, but the question is, and maybe I'm just not stating it properly, what's wrong with murder if there's no God? Why shouldn't I kill other people to get what I want if there's no God?
Because it doesn't help society.
Why do I care about society?
Because we as a group should worry about society. We should be making the betterment of ourselves.
But Kyle, you're importing a moral law into a frame that has no moral law. As an atheist, you're trying to say there is no God, which means there is no standard of rightness out there. But I'm saying this is my personal standard of rightness, which would mean somebody else could come along like Hitler or Stalin and say, Kyle, if there's no standard beyond neither you or me, then I can do whatever I want, including killing you to get what you have.
It's a very good point. It's a very good point.
And, kudos to this gentleman for at least acknowledging Frank's point as a good one. It's often very difficult for opposing sides to concede on a point regarding a subject like this, but I thought it was a very humbling thing to do on his part.
I can see where you're coming from. I don't think that God is needed in a sense I'm not looking for perfection. I don't think anybody here is. I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for human beings just to simply work together to better society. I don't really see that need for a perfect identity up above.
Okay, I mean, I'm not saying that an atheist can't be a good person. I'm not saying atheists don't know right from wrong. That's not my point. My point is that it seems to me it's difficult to justify what rightness is if everything is reduced to human opinion. Which human gets to decide, right? It's subjective then, as Levi was saying before, it's just in my subjective mind. If there's not an external reference to say that this is good and this is evil, then we're all just here and we're fending for ourselves. Now, a lot of people will say, and I appreciate your question, it's a very good question. A lot of people will say, well, we need to cooperate to get along, right? Actually, that's not true. Take somebody like Stalin. He cooperated with very few people, just his henchmen, and he killed 20 million people to get what he wanted. And then he died on his deathbed at the age of 74, shaking his fist at God one last time. He never paid for his sins on this life. Okay? So the problem, it seems to me, is we know, and you know right, and you know what's right and wrong, and I know it too, and I don't need to believe in God to know that. I just need there to be a God to justify it. Let me put it this way. A lot of atheists say, look, I know right from wrong, and I agree with you know right from wrong. But that's like saying, I can know what a book says and deny there's an author, which is true. But there would be no book to read unless there was an author. The same is true when it comes to morality. You can know what the right thing to do is and deny there's a God, but there would be no right thing to do unless there was a God. Does that make sense?
I guess I can see your point, yes.
If I gave you a book, would you read it?
Yes.
Okay, good. Before we go, where's Emma? She's back there somewhere. She'll be at the book table. Let me meet you at the book table and give you a book. Thank you so much.
And again, tremendous respect for this gentleman to not only listen to the response being given, but to think on it and to allow it to make sense as to why moral law can only exist because of a moral lawgiver. As Frank said in his brief analogy, you can read a book and understand what you're reading and yet deny that there was ever an author who wrote it, but there would be no book to read. There would be nothing to understand if there was no author in the first place. There has to be an author. To deny that there is an author doesn't change the fact that there was an actual author who created the book that was read. It's the same with moral law. You can know right from wrong and deny the existence of a God who created the concepts and the standards for morality, but denying the existence of God does not change the fact that there is an actual God who created the concepts and standards for morality. The existence of moral law is actually one of the biggest factors to prove God's existence. For example, the fact that we as human beings throughout the ages and throughout every civilization have a conscience which universally illuminates to us that things such as murder and stealing is wrong and things such as kindness and love is good and right lets us know that there are objective moral truths or objective moral values that exist independently of any individual or group opinion. And since there are objective moral truths or values that exist consciously yet independently of any individual or group opinion, and since objective moral truths are also personal yet immaterial, it only stands to reason that these objective moral truths or values must come from an intelligent source outside of nature and outside of humanity that is also personal yet immaterial. For the theist like myself, we would classify that intelligent source as God. So can we have morality without there being a God? Well, yes, we could say that, but that would just be a denial of the truth. And that is that there would be no morality if there really wasn't a God. Our knowledge and our standard of rightness is not rooted in man, neither was it some kind of evolutionary development or process within humanity as time passed on. It was all rooted in God, but it was just discovered and revealed in man. With this understanding, this is why the psalmist says in Psalms chapter 14 and verse 1 that only fools say in their heart, there is no God. While many atheists would like to appeal to ethical theories such as utilitarianism, consequentialism, naturalism, evolution, and even Darwinism as a means of addressing the existence of morality, they will always fall short of really answering the question as to the ultimate source by which we determine what is right from wrong, given the fact that morality is a personal yet intellectual and immaterial truth that exists outside of nature and outside of our own humanity. Well, that's it for this video. I hope it was informative. If you like the content, please share it, leave some comments below on your thoughts on the subject, your thoughts on the Q&A by Frank and that wonderful gentleman. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and also hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to speed when I drop a new video. And of course, as always, as you delve back into studying the word, just remember to remind yourself that as I'm studying the word, I got to make sure I keep everything in context.